Peter Baldwin joins me now. Peter Baldwin, it's great to see you. Terrific piece, but throughout I get this feeling of amazement from you that the left you were in the left of the Labor Party, that the left could actually back this voice. Why your amazement?
Well, I'm not amazed that the left in its current incarnation backed the voice. What I'm amazed by, given the shift in the left's general attitude to matters relating to race and racism since the adoption of the ideology of culture and identity over the last few decades. In that context, it's not so surprising. Where it seems to me astounding is when you contrast the view of race that's been adopted now with what used to be core parts of left-wing ideology going back several decades. The left, the old left with all its faults, had some good points. One of its important good points was its general approach to race, the idea being that we should aspire to a society where a colourblind society where race becomes a marginal factor, where we don't concern ourselves with racial identity, that we regard it as irrelevant, strictly irrelevant. And of course, since the long march through the institutions by the successive radicalised generalisations and the development of a number of theoretical frameworks within academia, critical race theory and its sub-discipline called whiteness studies, the whole mentality relating to race has changed, and things that were formerly unthinkable have now become thinkable. For example, sorry, go on.
No, it seems so incredible how progressives who once fought racism now are fighting to include racism in our constitution. But Peter Baldwin, there seems to be a split here, right? Labor politicians who've retired, don't have anything to lose, I guess, seem much more against this idea. I've mentioned a number of them. You're one of them. How many are there of your former colleagues do you think are against this voice? And why is there this split between that generation and this new one that seem red hot to bring back racism and stick it in our constitution?
Well, I can't identify any people other than those who've publicly stated a viewpoint about it, so I can't give you any numbers. But there's a couple of aspects to that. Number one, it's partly generational. I mean, I got involved in left-wing politics in the late 1960s, and which took the view about race, which I just described, and contrast that with the current view. Would you like to hear my favourite example of something that I heard on the ABC, unsurprisingly, that encapsulates the current mentality? I mean, this is the sort of thing that I find unbelievable. Can I just quickly quote something?
Go right ahead.
There's a program on the ABC called The Minefield, which is supposed to deal with ethical dilemmas and so-called wicked problems. And it's moderated by a guy called Scott Stevens. And there was an episode called, with the title, Wrong to be White. It's interesting in itself, isn't it?
No, for God's sake.
But it went on for about 50 minutes. And it was a recitation of the problems of systemic racism and whiteness. Whiteness is treated as some sort of defect. And towards the end of it, the host, this is Scott Stevens, said the following. I'll read it to you. I was careful to transcribe it because I could barely believe it. The great moral debility about being white is that people have willfully chosen the trinkets and accoutrements of the accretions of power and privilege over a much more fundamental bondedness with other human beings. I mean, that is,
Peter,
if we were speaking in a
you're driving me nuts. Don't get me angry. You're firing me up. Don't read out any more of that because
it's an absolute classic. I mean, that is, if we were speaking in a theological register, we would call that a tremendous.
Peter Baldwin, no wonder people want to be like Bruce Pascoe.
So,
well, no wonder people want to be like Bruce Passer and call themselves Aboriginal instead, Peter. Yeah, well, that's it. Peter Baldwin, I urge people to read your essay in Quadrant today, because this cannot stand what's going on. Thank you so much for your time.